Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. Addressing the dropout crisis one strategy at a time. Brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center with support from Penn Foster and Catapult Learning and in partnership with Clemson Broadcast Productions. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Solutions. It's summertime, and I think it's time to do some interesting, different kinds of things. And I'm Marty Duckenfield. I'm here again with my co-host and good friend, Karen Withington. We got a special show today. Aren't you excited about it?
It's going to be great.
We've been talking around this table right now with our guests and learning a lot, and now it's time to share that learning with you. And Karen, why don't you first, before we get into introducing our guests, tell us a couple things that are going on at the National Dropout Prevention Center. As you all know, there's always something going on, and this show actually relates to another project going on besides our conferences. But let's start with the conferences and go from there.
Okay. Well, we have fall 2015. We have 2 events planned, and both of them are going to be excellent. They're different. In September 20th through 23rd, 2015, we'll have a Diploma Planning Institute. That's going to be in Biloxi, Mississippi, September 20th through 23rd. That's where small groups can come together from schools and work on their dropout prevention plans. Then our larger event is in October, late October, the 25th through the 28th. We'll have our National Dropout Prevention Network Conference. That's in San Antonio, Texas, and we'd love for everyone to come to that and see us in San Antonio on the Riverwalk. It's going to be really, really nice.
Oh, it's always great in San Antonio, and it's a perfect place to convene. Now, this program today, as I mentioned, has special guests, and one of the things that relates to another, not event, but project of the National Dropout Prevention Center is their international journal, which is an online journal, and it's called Engage. So could you tell us a little bit about that, Karen?
Yes, we of course, the Dropout Prevention Center and Network are interested in student engagement all over the world, how this happens, how we can get students to be engaged in learning and then wind up as successful in life, and youth development, which is our topic today, and not only in the national area but also internationally. How does this work? How can we best support that kind of the good work in youth development? So we have an international journal named Engage, the International Journal on Student Engagement. And we have an edition which should come out today or within the next week. It's an online journal. One of our guests today, which I will introduce in a minute, is a co-author in one of the articles. And all the articles revolve around student engagement in different parts of the world.
Well, we thought this was a perfect opportunity to invite the author to join us today, and his professor, who takes a great lead role, and they'll be specially introduced in a minute. But it's really important, I think, for the National Dropout Prevention, has always felt since they started Engage, that we can learn from other cultures as well as they can learn from us too. So there's this nice exchange, because we all have the issue of developing young people all over this globe, and it's not just limited to here in the United States. I'll be really interested in the discussion board afterwards, Karen, to see if people see similarities to some of the issues they're facing here in America to what we're going to see in Kenya. And so there's ways to follow up in discussion with this, and can you share that with our audience?
Well, we have a discussion board on the bottom of the page where you go to look at this webcast at dropoutprevention.org. There's a discussion board you can log into, and we can talk about this particular show. Also, there's of course a national conversation going on about student engagement. We might connect with some of those social media things, but today's show revolves around Kenya, and we do have a hashtag that we could use to continue this discussion about student engagement in Kenya, and that could be the hashtag Kenya. And very simple hashtag, but we could continue that discussion the Dropout Prevention Center has a Twitter account at NDPCN. But there are various ways that we can continue the discussion, and I hope we will.
Yeah, I think so. That's one of the things, the principles that we go by on professional development, whatever kind that goes on here, is that it's not just a one-time thing, and there's lots of follow-up. And in addition to the discussion venues that Karen talked about, I still have yet to tweet, but lots of y'all do, I know that, so you have an opportunity. But the resources that will also be on the article that James has written, our Dean, former Emeritus Dean's blog, and he'll talk about all those things, but the Engage will be on there, all kinds of great resources so you can learn more about this. But we're very happy to focus on Kenya today, and Karen gets the privilege of introducing you to our new guest. So Karen, let's get started.
I am delighted to introduce our guest for today's show, Dr. Lawrene Allen. He is Emeritus Dean of the College of Health, Education, and Human Development at Clemson University, and a professor in the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management Department.
Correct.
And we're very glad to have you. Dr. Allen has visited Kenya multiple times, many times, spent 5 months there recently, and we will give you a link to a blog where you can hear all about that, 5 months in Kenya and the continuing relationship that Clemson University is having with Kenya. So Dr. Allen, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Mr. James Nampushi, soon to be Dr. James Nampushi, is a doctoral student in the Department of Parks, Recreation, Tourism Management at Clemson University, a student of Dr. Allen's, Masai, from Kenya, and we're very glad to have you here with us today as well.
Thank you. I'm glad to.
Thank you.
All right. So, we want to get started. I guess, Larry, you can start to tell us how did this association with Kenya happen from here at Clemson University?
You know, it's a relatively short history of our work in Africa, although it's going on 13, 14 years now. We started back in about 2002, 2003. Our Department of Parks, Recreation, Tourism Management is internationally known. It's a very strong program, one of the strongest in the world, literally. And some of students from Africa were expressing interest in coming, especially in the tourism area, because in the developing world, tourism is such a major part of their economic opportunities. So we had a Ford scholar come to us in 2002, Alois Nizuki. Was really one of our first students that came from in the area of East Africa. And Dr. Ken Back then made several trips over to East Africa in response to some of the interest that was developing there, and it just evolved over the last 13, 14 years, but it really took off in about 2010. I was still the Dean of the College of Health, Education, Human Development. Some of our colleagues from Masai Mara University came here as a result of our academic programs. They knew about us. They were very interested in starting a Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management academic program with a strong focus on what we're referred to today, sustainable tourism. That's actually how James got here, with some good colleagues and friends from Greenville who have sponsored James and others as well. But we've been involved really since 2010. We've really done so much more. In 2011, we went back to Kenya and we taught a class in natural resource management and sustainable tourism. In 2012, 2013, we did 2 book drives. We raised over 5,000 books and sent them, and James was instrumental in that happening. And James was probably the reason why we got FedEx to provide all the shipping, which is 5,000 books is fairly expensive to ship. So we certainly appreciate FedEx and what they've done. We've also we've done leadership training over there in 2013. We did a leadership training program with the faculty and staff at Masai Mara University. Our Global Safety and Security Institute here on campus, road safety is a critical factor, and we're trying to build a relationship in Kenya, and actually vehicular deaths are the highest in the world in Kenya.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's a critical situation. As Karen alluded to, last fall, I stepped down as dean July 1 of 2014, and July 26th I was on a plane to Kenya and spent the next 5 months in all 5 of the East Africa countries: Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and Uganda. I was supposed to go to Burundi, and I had to cancel that trip because of some conflicts. But the reason that I was there was to expand Clemson University's role and involvement, not just in the parks, recreation, tourism management, a lot in terms of education, health, youth development, which is a keen interest of mine personally. So we worked in all of those areas, and we have faculty, we have colleagues from agriculture, colleagues from the School of Education, other colleagues that are part of our entire partnership. And we've developed several MOUs with various universities in the 5 countries, as well as different ministries. So it's quite comprehensive what we've been doing in Clemson, and we're just trying to make a difference. And we've had students from East Africa. We have between about 12 PhD students right now from the 5 East Africa countries. Outstanding young people. 3 of them just graduated this May, or 2, excuse me. 2, and James and Bernard are going to graduate in August. And they're going back and making a huge difference in their countries. So let me stop there with the introduction.
Well, it's exciting work that this university is involved in, and I always feel that so many of the things that are showcased here are models or inspiration for other universities or school districts or whatever communities to look at. So I'm looking forward to sharing the inspiration from y'all today. And I think, you know, when you get at the point of being in higher education, you started making observations about the society from which these students came that you were working with. And I think we're going to focus a lot on that today. And certainly James grew up there, and he'll be able to share a lot of the stories. So I think we could start showing what I like to do. I told you I have no spatial intelligence. I love maps. You start showing us where Kenya is. Let's start with that. And let's zero in.
Start with the continent.
Yeah, we'll start with the continent. And maybe you can show our viewers the map of Africa now, and we can have a look at that.
You know, it's interesting as you look at the map of Africa. I'm talking about over in the right-hand side there, the East Africa countries there. You see Ethiopia, but really southern Kenya, Tanzania. You can hardly see Rwanda and Burundi, but they're to the left of Tanzania, and Uganda is north of Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is just to the left, west of Kenya and Tanzania. That's where we have focused. Now, for all of us, I had colleagues that actually were to join me last fall, and because of some of the turmoil both in East Africa as well as Ebola, which is in West Africa. I mean, Ebola was further from me in Kenya than I am right now with what we had in Dallas and, you know, people coming back to New York and New England. So I was further away from the Ebola crisis than we are sitting here in the United States. But our geography is somewhat suspect for many of us. So that gives you a little sense there. In terms of East Africa, you can see there the enlargement of the countries that we've been working with. And again, we have relationships in all of those countries and have projects, and that was my reason for going, was to develop various projects with all the countries. And I can say Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, we have potential projects, and we're pretty close to negotiating some of them right now. Burundi, we're still working on some efforts.
Well, that's exciting. You've got things going. And now I find this next slide really interesting, the one that I know is coming next.
Yeah, you know, part of my observation, and I did try and keep a blog. I think I've got 12 blogs on the website. Just everything from going to a Maasai funeral with 15,000 people to show respect to one of the education leaders in Kenya to a Maasai wedding. And it was just intriguing, and talk about all that in meetings with various people and travels throughout the 5 countries. So I think people would find it quite interesting, and it was wonderful for me to reflect. I tried to do it every 2 weeks. I did a little more frequently than that. I did 12, and I think I was there 16, 17 weeks. But one of the observations was that the developing world is a world of dichotomies, and we see that in East Africa. And these are two pictures in Kenya. You've got downtown Nairobi there in the upper right, and in the lower left, you have two children there out in the Mara, as we call it, Masai Mara National Reserve. It's referred to as the Mara. These are two young people that live in the mud shacks there, and you still have the predominance of people in Kenya are still living in very rural areas without electricity, without running water. It's interesting how they have incredible survival skills, and James certainly can talk about that. James is one of those survivors. So it's a constant dichotomy. And actually, this next slide, whoops, yeah, there I go. I'm getting ahead of myself. Most of these pictures I took myself. One thing I did learn, I have no artistic talent whatsoever. And my wife bought me this wonderful camera that I have no idea how to use. But some of these pictures came out fairly well. But you'll see there's some that didn't come out quite as well. But this goes along with my dichotomy issue here. Up in the upper right, I'm meeting with a group of village elders in Sikanani, Kenya, which is just literally right outside of Masai Mara National Reserve. And the gentleman, unfortunately, with his back to us is the chief there in the area. And these are all village elders. Now, elders doesn't mean necessarily that you're older. You're leaders, and some of these young men are quite young.
Yes, they are.
But that's the leadership, and that's the governance that's going on in very rural Kenya. On the bottom, you see 4 gentlemen, one of them being myself. But the gentleman shaking hands to my immediate left there is Senator Aturo. He's Speaker of the Kenyan Senate. He happens to be a Clemson graduate. He's a 1992 Clemson graduate in agriculture economics, and wonderful man. The gentleman to his right is Chairman Kamwaro, who was the chairman of the licensing board for the country of Kenya. Very, very influential gentleman who's working with us in terms of the road safety issue and trying to develop an institute at Masai Mara University in road safety, and he's been instrumental in that. The gentleman to my immediately right there in the picture is Professor Simon Seno. He's the Deputy Vice Chancellor, which is Vice President of Masai Mara University. Professor Seno was just here at Clemson, and we finished a grant to USAID on conservation and anti-poaching activities in the Mara. Obviously, poaching is a major issue worldwide, but when you look at the economies of developing countries, so much of their economies are based around natural resources and wildlife, especially their tourism economies. And we see the poaching of elephants and rhinos especially, but several different species, as critical to their continued lifestyle and way of living, but also economically it's critical. So we wrote that grant while he was here in April.
I saw you had on the slide employment as a challenge, and I was thinking that there would be different employment opportunities, urban, rural, but that tourism and parks and recreation would be in both places.
Yeah, you're right, it is. And you're seeing, they're trying to build their tourism economy, but there's so many issues as we're talking about today, and I tried to capture 3 or 4 of them there in terms of the total picture of development in the country, and with a special focus on, obviously, on young people, because we're doing a lot of work in that area. But let me just quickly run through these. Governance, they're under a new form of government. 2010, they passed a new constitution, and it's a really this issue of providing, it's much more of a system like we have here in the United States, providing much more authority as well as financial support to the 47 counties in Kenya. And those counties really are equivalent to our states. And they've elected governors, 47 governors to each of those. But the leadership development that I'm referring to there is some of the counties just aren't ready for that type of responsibility, and there's growing pains going on in all aspects of it. The point is to provide more authority and responsibility to the county governments and less to the national government. Obviously more representative government structure, which certainly we subscribe to here in the U.S. But there's these leadership challenges that are going on, which impact, obviously, all of these things mentioned here, education, youth, etc. So it's a critical time in their evolution even though they gained their independence in 1963, they've been independent for a little over 50 years. But even that, moving from that colonization to that independence, even though it's been 50 years, it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle. And now you add a new constitution on top of that. Significant issues going on. Education and training we're going to talk about throughout this. There's some issues there that we'll get to in a couple of slides. Employment is a big issue, as Karen, you've already alluded to. The employment opportunities just aren't there, and it's really self-employment. It's really building your own opportunities. The informal economy, as they refer to it, young people building opportunities for them that have economic, entrepreneurial skills, etc. Empowerment still remains a major issue, especially gender issues with young women. Youth is an empowerment issue. Youth did not have much of a voice in Kenya or in Africa for that part, especially as they moved to independence. Youth were forgotten for the most part because they were so focused on dealing with independence and how they developed their countries from that manner. So there's a lot of activities going on in all of those. So let me hit some of the critical things here. Education, and Jane, please chime in. James experienced this.
He lived it. He lived it. Yes.
He grew up in this situation.
Yeah.
But let me just highlight the slide here. When we talk about literacy, the definition of literacy for what's being used with the UN and others is being able to read and write at the second grade level. Okay, so 64% literacy in Kenya. So that means 64% of their citizens are able to read and write at what they would call standard 2, second grade. A little different concept of literacy from what we have here, but that's a true advancement. And in fact, Kenya is one of the leaders in terms of literacy at that rate. We do have there's public education, free education provided now in the primary schools. That's first grade to 8th grade, standard 1 to standard 8. Secondary education still has to be paid for, and you see a huge dropout there, a 40% dropout rate. You also have to test to get into the better high schools.
So there's a couple of barriers there. First is cost, and then secondly is
testing.
Testing, yeah.
And there may not be they wouldn't have a high school in every village. How far away would people have to go?
James, how far do some folks walk to go to even the primary schools?
Yeah, to begin with, the variety of challenges that kids go through to access an education in Kenya. And taking you a little back to primary school, where the foundation of education starts. I went through areas in primary school, starting from standard 1 through standard 8, that is grade 1 through 8, and I had no shoes. I was walking 9 miles a day, running through the elephants with the natural wild. Nature dictates when and how long you shall live. And for 8 years, the resources are not enough, the desks are not enough, the school books, textbooks and writing books are not enough, pencils for writing are not enough. And sometimes the teachers are not even enough. You could have one teacher teaching 4 to 3 classes because the conditions for teachers are so hostile in the rural countrysides. So well-trained teachers don't wish to go there because they better be in urban centers, urban schools, because they are able also to access other necessities. Well, in the rural country, there are no necessities, so you live on what is there. Dirty brown water. And little kids, stay late before joining grade 1 or kindergarten because they cannot walk the 9-mile distance. Right. So the distance is a challenge. And then the availability of the school, the closeness of the schools within the villages is almost non-existent. So distance, food, because if you are going 9 miles, when do you come back again to have lunch? Where is even lunch? I used to have a cup of milk in the morning and come back late 6 or 7 in the night to have another cup of milk.
And nothing in between?
Nothing in between. And one time I remember passing off. I went off because I could not. I came back to the village before coming. I couldn't. There was no water. I didn't have water. It was so hot, and I had to stay. I was in grade 7. And I had to make better grades for me to go up to the high school, to a better high school, which is a boarding. So coming back in the village, the cows are not yet there, so there was no milk for me, for my mom to milk and give me. And then I just went, lay down, and I didn't even know how it happened. And then they came back and put some water and milk through me. So those are some of the challenges kids go through in primary school. When it comes to allocation of resources to schools, like getting teachers to go and teach, the teacher service, the National Teacher Service Commission, does post teachers. The government employs the teachers and send teachers to teach in those schools. But sometimes it is so political that the best teachers are not sent to those marginalized areas or rural settings like where I came from. And so when it comes to performing and making grades, better test scores in the 8th grade at the nationals, doing the national exam, guess what you expect? The best top kids in the nation comes from urban areas. Their parents are educated. They are driving to school. They don't burn energy 9 miles every day to go to school and come back home. They have water. They have food. They have uniform pairs, several pairs of uniform and writing and reading materials. I remember I had only one pair of school uniform. And when I go to school and it rains on me, coming back to the village, I had to dry them on a smoky fireplace, and the following day, for me to put them on the following day. And putting on the following day, I go to class smelling smoke. Who cares?
Of course.
Everybody, it's not about smoke. It is about getting there and getting the opportunity to read, to go to high school. So those are some of the challenges at the basic level. When it comes to high school, high school is determined by the best grade you made in the grade 8. And that this grade is determined by the national examiners. And when these exams results are released, every kid and all their parents panic. They don't know what to expect. And the examiner doesn't care about where you came from and whether you had enough books and teachers to teach you. All what it is there, you made an F, and you cannot go to high school. So the government created, they call it a quota system, but that from 400 upwards to 500, because the maximum you can make in grade 8 is 500. So if you make from 400 up to 500 or 400 and above, you have a more likelihood of joining the national school, the best in the country. From 400 below to 350, you can go to the provincial school, like a state school. And then from 300 below, now you go to district schools, which again have less resources, like where you came from in primary. So, and then the major challenge is the politics involved in getting this thing, the securing the national school. Sometimes kids from these rural settings work hard and secure good grades to go to high school. And for me, from my personal experiences, I had to learn how to put a shoe when I went to 9th grade in secondary school. I was forced to do it because there are bathrooms and everywhere, the cement, that is my first time to see the cement. And I had to learn it. It was an advantage for me to run to school every morning without shoes because I was light. And I could navigate through the elephant and the buffaloes.
You could run fast.
And my scare was a buffalo, so I knew without shoes, shoes will add me more weight. But now in high school, I got to go to boarding school, and I had to struggle to find which shoe fits my spread food.
One of the things I noticed in all the materials you provided is that this shows an incredible will for an education. Just think about it. Just think about this. Running through fields with lions and buffalo, barefooted, 9 miles, half a cup of milk, nothing until the end of the day. Extraordinary will to get an education. And I think you've said that the education system isn't English.
Yeah.
So the teachers need to have a good standard of English, and that sometimes is an issue because they don't.
It's a real challenge, because if you are trained, if you are in school and you get a teacher who is not properly or professionally trained in a training college, teachers training college for English, the grammar itself and your basic foundations of learning English skills for writing and speaking is jeopardized.
Yes.
And I was glad I got one of the best teachers in English for me now to be able to speak English.
Yes.
And I used to go through whipping, several whips and canes for me to perfect my grammar and try to be able to speak it out. But I am very excited because I was committed to it, and I knew one time I will be somebody and I'll be able to communicate and share what I know and communicate it properly for others and help transform others. But guess what? How many kids are unable to go through that process, persevere, and drop out? 90% drop out in primary school, particularly in those rural settings. And again, the parents, the families are not enabling because they don't have enough to buy you school uniform, to buy shoes. Yes, now they say the primary school is free, but who is buying school fees? Who is buying uniform, books, and shoes, and the other necessities? Classrooms are built by parents. How do you? I remember at the beginning I learned under a tree. We sit under a tree. The teacher comes and there is no blackboard, so we improvise, and then. Now it is a burden again to the parents. If those backgrounds, families and rural areas are poor, how would we expect them to come up and build a big block building to shelf these kids from wind, dust, and rain? Yeah. So there are still challenges.
There are a lot of challenges, Larry. I mean, I say you go over there. Where do you start? But James is quite a success story. I mean, I'm just so impressed. It's just incredible, and I can't imagine going through 8 years and then on this exam where you're competing against, like you say, the urban youth who've had all these really advantages. How you must be holding your breath and hoping for a good outcome. I mean, worked as hard as you did. I mean, that must be an extraordinary feeling when you make it.
Well, yeah, I look forward to it, and I still, it's all about sacrifices, it is all about commitment, and it is all about choices, and staying focused. I knew from the beginning, I come from a family of many, big family. I'm the only one who went to school. And my father, the Maasais did not want to encourage to sell cows for us to go to school, so because the cows were so for supporting the community, so education was nothing. So but immediately I got into, I knew he was like throwing me and go and survive. If you will make it, fine. If you don't make it, fine. But no cows to be sold, to pay for you to meet your education expenses. But I was determined to go through whatever I go through to get it. And once I got my head in, I never lifted. By the time I lifted up, I was through high school. And when I went through high school, I could not go straight to university because I didn't have the money. I did so well in the high school, and I didn't have the money. I had to pull out of, to discontinue, go work, do some work, formal and informal, to raise money to get back to university. And that is how I did. I got to go to university because my passion and driving motivation was, for how long are we going to be waiting for these external teachers, professionals to come and teach us? Where my teachers in primary and high schools were non-Maasais. So if I could not speak Swahili or English, I could not communicate to them. So I went through a learning process that had to shape me up to accept and appreciate and adjust to every situation and process in my academic life. And when I went to university, I went to Moi. You know, Moi University is far, like 4 hours drive from Narok, up northwest of Kenya. And when I went there, and I went as a mature student, and I was paying for myself. I sold cows, and perhaps some of my family members saw me stupid. I'm selling everything, and I'm leaving everybody in the village to access university education. But I said, don't worry, so long as I'm not selling you a cow, and I know one time we will need to make a change in this rural community. We need to demonstrate that we are not stupid here. All despite the marginalization intended by the colonial government and the succeeding regimes that are now in place. I need to demonstrate that here we are given the opportunities and the enabling conditions, we can make it.
Did your family and community think that maybe when you got educated you would just leave and not come back?
Yes, and that was the scare. That was the worry. Many. And sometimes some of the local people, students coming or members coming, accessing an education from the local communities, when they get the better education, then they don't even want to get back to the rural settings because they are not much. The conditions are not enabling. They want to have a better life. They want to drive a nice car, and they want to be in urban where they could see television and enjoy power and everything. But to me, so they were thinking we are just wasting our cows, our resources, to build somebody who will run away from us. And in my heart, my motivation and driving passion was to demonstrate a difference. Show them, despite of all this, I will come back and be a role model and help transform the lives of those little ones to see the light of what I have seen, and to be able to provide and propel help the local community come out of the forceful or the intended marginalization process that they are in and they went through.
Well, you really are a role model, and I know, Larry, this is probably a lot what motivates you, is having more young people who could measure up to what James is accomplishing. And that strong will of getting that education is so remarkable. I think a lot of us in our country think we have some tough situations, but I defy anyone to find one as difficult as what you've described, and congratulations to you for getting this far. And I know, Larry, you want to kind of help us zero in now on some of the things that you've observed and ways to go.
Let me just continue this discussion that James has raised here. And I think in the one slide here with the education, an interesting point there I have here, 50% of university graduates are unemployable. This is according to a new study that just came out. And the match, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, the match between the educational priorities and the standards and the competencies that are being taught versus what the government and the private sector want in terms of employable skills. They aren't matched up. Now, you know, we have to be cautious, and it concerns me, some of the dialogue that's been going on. You know, we don't want vocational education to be at our university levels and be the entire curriculum at the university levels. So the dialogue has to be balanced, but right now there's a huge concern about young people graduating in a variety of areas that really do not have, what, as seen by many institutions in Africa, as not having the skills necessary to be directly employed immediately. But you know, that's a debate we have here in the United States. So
of course, it is here as well.
James already, this slide here, James has already talked about limiting resources, facilities, teachers and lecturers, teachers just the training and their backgrounds. The previous slide, I should have pointed out, these are slides of a school out in Sikanani, Kenya, and these are young people. If I counted correctly, there's 40 young people in this classroom, and you see the desks that they have there.
One teacher?
Actually one teacher and two aides, as our vernacular in the United States. But even that, their training is limited. The headmaster, a wonderful, wonderful lady, her heart is as big as this room. Charity, even Charity's training is limited. She has a 2-year degree program, and the two aides, one has a high school education, the other one has what they would refer to as a certificate, which is roughly 1 year of higher education.
Right.
But these young people, we were to work with these. I was to take a group of Clemson students to work with these young people in May. Unfortunately, because of financial situation, got too complex that we could not take them. But we're hoping possibly next year to take them. But that's a school. I'm purchasing paint for charity.
Oh yeah.
I'm purchasing. Let me think. How many? 18 liters.
18 liters.
18 liters.
Paint.
No.
18 tins. 18 containers of paint.
Oh, for the walls.
For the walls,
for the
to paint the entire school.
Yes.
Oh,
The school is like a one-room schoolhouse,
Okay.
although it's two-room schoolhouse. Yeah. But let me move on here because the issues, certainly education is one of the primary issues. But as we look here, when we talk about youth, and certainly youth and out-of-school youth are a major issue in all of developing world. But when they talk about youth in Africa, it's a different age group. In Kenya, actually, they consider youth 15 to 35.
Yes.
Okay, many countries it's 15 to 30, very different than here in the United States. So, and you have many young people, if they don't go to secondary school, they drop out of school, and there's really very little for them. The out-of-school youth are not given any, I should say in the past, have not been given much attention, and it's created real problems for the country and all of the developing world, quite honestly. I can think I was in Liberia 3 years ago, and Liberia had a 20-year civil war, and it was just over in 2006, 2005, 2006. So you had 20 years of young people growing up with nothing other than war, and learning how to shoot a rifle and be involved in one side or the other, and you see that in so many different places. Kenya, thank goodness, hasn't had that kind of disruption, but still it's a problem.
Is this issue both in urban and rural areas?
It's in both, but the bigger issue is in the rural areas again. But you do have major, urbanization is going on. All the young people are moving to the major cities, Nairobi being the major one in Kenya, and consequently you do have these large disadvantaged neighborhoods, slang word of slums, that you have hundreds of thousands of young people and families living in these deplorable situations. Now, even out in rural Kenya, not having food and water, or excuse me, not having electricity and water is very common, but it's not the same density, it's not the same problems they have in these urban areas where you have this influx of population and so many of our young people that have nothing to do, they're jammed in, they have no electricity, no running water, even in those areas. They may have electricity, but you can think of the health problems and the violence and the criminality that's going on there just to survive. But
and
you
the
see
options to go back to school. I mean, once you stop going to school, life comes in and it just gets
Limited.
more and more difficult.
Yeah.
But it also, if you don't have alternative schools or online schools and things like that, or how's that situation in Kenya?
No, it's there's not those many of additional educational opportunities like we have in the United States, although there's multiple efforts going on. I mean, literally thousands of efforts going on to help young people today and improve the education system. I mean, the people of Kenya and East Africa and all of Africa are so committed to trying to move themselves forward. It's inspirational, quite honestly, and that is why I'm there. I see that.
That will seems very strong among the population, and it's this resource area that seems to be in such of all different kinds of resources, and that's kind of where you are coming from.
Let me just move on here. As we talk about youth, there's limited support for out-of-school youth. I've already mentioned the efforts are disjointed. It's not. There are many outstanding programs for youth in Kenya, but you don't have the national agenda. You do have the National Youth Service, which does exist in Kenya. But in terms of having the other youth development organizations like we have in the United States, certainly 4-H, Boys and Girls Clubs, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, I could go on and on and on.
Right.
You don't have all of those national level types of youth development opportunities, especially for young people out of school. So there's a lot of idleness going on, and there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of resentment, and there needs to be a more concerted effort. As you see here on this slide, it's need further training for professionals. We're actually going over there. One of my reasons for going over there in 12 days, I guess, is to do a 3-day training program for youth workers. We're going to be focusing in Nairobi at this point in time, but we want to do it throughout the country. But 2 of my colleagues, Dr. Garst and Dr. Bowers, the 3 of us are going over there and doing this 3-day training program for youth workers in conjunction with Masai Mara University, because we're going to be discussing developing an academic program in youth development, as we have here at Clemson. We do have a baccalaureate and a master's degree in youth development leadership. That certainly this would probably be the first one in Kenya, may even be the first one in Africa, I'm not sure. But also in terms of the national policies, that we need national policies that are really very progressive in terms of helping youth and recognizing that we have to pay more attention to the youth of Kenya as well as in all the developing world, and provide those out-of-school types of experience for those people that have chosen or been forced or family has called them home to work, and really are very bright, as James said, and certainly James is a testament to that. Very bright young people that haven't had the opportunity, so there needs to be that work going on.
I want to point everybody to James's article that will be on this website, which does provide that historical context, because this is a society that's so different than what existed earlier, where we have these communities and everybody had their roles. And now, because of westernization and so forth, everything is in topsy-turvy. And so, what you're doing right now is helping them provide an infrastructure to support a new African community. Those basic principles that are so good are there, but how to do it, and the youth doesn't naturally know how to do that, and I think that's terrific that you're going. Now, the people that you're training, are they from Nairobi, or are they from all across the country?
They'll be predominantly from Nairobi, but there will be some people from outside the area. Certainly there'll be some folks coming from Narok County, which is where Masai Mara University is, which is about 140 kilometers from
Nairobi.
Can we not talk in miles?
Pardon me?
about 80 miles.
Oh, yeah, well, that's okay.
1.6 kilometers to a mile. Yeah. So we will have some people out there.
And they will be spreading the word then with people in their local communities.
Right. It's more of a train-the-trainer format.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Very much so. Yeah. Let me just go on. I know we're going to run out of time quickly,
we certainly can't.
We've got some other issues as it relates to youth and the whole youth education, etc. You see here that we have about 200,000 young people in university system in Kenya, about 50,000 graduates a year. But as we said before, in a slide, about 50% of them are viewed as unemployable just because of that matching. It's not that they didn't get a quality education, but it just doesn't match up with the workforce needs. And you see there 75% of even these graduates are unemployed. That creates a situation that has to be addressed.
Yes.
And they're trying to do that with much more of an entrepreneurial education system. I don't disagree with that at all, but I certainly want to make sure it's a balance there, because you don't want your entire education system to be just focused on vocational and an entrepreneurial education. So that's going on. But we've got to address the youth unemployment issues and the youth opportunities there. And as I've said already, the education and workforce skills are not matched.
And the families and communities, I think I was trying to make this point earlier, that I think, James, your family and community kind of came together to support you
to come over
once
here.
They realized you were going to come back and
to bring it that point really up. When I finished first degree in Mo University, my family and the rest of my village and the neighborhood and the entire Maasai saw that education is important. And there is a hope. And this guy is coming back to help us. He's not going to have a better life and run away from us after exhausting our resources. So it is now to their realization that when I told them, now I'm leaving the village again to go to overseas, to come to America to do my master's, they sold everything, including the little chicken, hens, a head, donkeys, cows, sheep, goats, to raise funds to buy my ticket and get me my living expenses to come over to Clemson and study. And every time I go back, I go and meet them, and they say, finish and come back home.
Yes.
And they have seen, they have built trust, and they have seen that we are not only helping James to again have a better knowledge and skill and stay in America and work, but this is somebody, a son of our own, coming back to the village to inspire, motivate, help transform our kids to look forward and be a role model that others can believe in and trust that it is possible. There is a myth in a book written by one of the first Maasai scholars called Henry Olekulet. The book title is It Possible to Hold a Spear and a Pen at the same time? So I have lived to that, to prove that it is possible to hold a pen on the right hand and a spear on the left hand and make the balance. Catch your culture, take care of your cows, manage your community, work with your community, integrate the knowledge of your community with the scientific knowledge you gain in class. And now they have seen that, and my dream will be to go and rewrite it, edit that book, and come out to say, yes, it is possible to hold a pen and a spear together and create that balance of indigenous knowledge, scientific knowledge, for the betterment of society.
Exactly.
In any region or nation.
This is the answer. I mean, this is the answer. It's just fantastic. So and it's an exciting time for you about to be completed here and be able to go back and encourage that growth.
It is interesting because I have learned and others have learned. And what Clemson has done, the university, perhaps it may not have been known. Clemson is touching lives across the globe, directly or indirectly. I have 3 references, and myself being one. I come from a rural setting that Dr. Larry has met my parents. He knows where I come from, and whatever, he knows almost, at least he has a testimony. And then, when I came here in 2009, I found a Chinese student in PRTM doing his doctoral program. And he got the sponsorship from Clemson. The same guy went back to China. He became a director of tourism, making impacts globally. Clemson making impacts not only inside America but in other nations. Before I came to Clemson, I met a student from PRTM, an American student doing research in Tanzania, not in Kenya, and then sponsored by and supported by Clemson to go and investigate issues affecting other regions and nations. And she came back here, and she got that. When she graduated, she brought that, and she has published that. We are now using what she found out to address issues in Tanzania. And as if it is not enough, the same student was hired to go to UK and do for a research program in one of the UK universities. See how Clemson is transforming lives across the globe.
That's exciting.
This I needed to bring it to make it notice that
it makes you feel so good, doesn't it?
Well, we refer to James as the ambassador.
He is
for
an
Clemson.
ambassador.
And
I've got to move this conversation on because of time. But the next issue, you mentioned a woman, and this is an issue in Kenya about educating girls.
Right, very much so.
So let's talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, let me just this slide here, the one that's up there now, just very quickly on the lower left there. This is interesting. These are young people there that you see. This is a demonstration out in western Kenya where I was, and I'm in the middle of that. That's me taking that picture. You can't see me, but I'm shooting out of my vehicle, and these are young men who have motorcycles, which they refer to as boda-bodas, and they make their living by giving people rides on the motorcycles. But Narok County, where I was for 5 months, Narok County implemented a new tax on the motorcycles, and this is a demonstration which I was caught in for over 2 hours, sitting there while they're demonstrating about the tax issue that they have.
Interesting. Interesting.
This one, as you're talking about empowerment and empowerment of young people. This is the outskirts of Nairobi there on the right, and the very disadvantaged areas. and you see the density of people there, and it just the resources aren't there, and this urbanization is a huge problem that's impacting youth, and there is a sense of helplessness and hopelessness for many young people, as well as many families themselves.
Absolutely.
And more specific to your point, Marty. And I even hesitated to put up this slide, but it's still there, and it's real, and it's
reality.
It's huge problems, and it is reality that you see the number of young people, that a number of women that are still experiencing physical abuse. Prostitution is disproportionately high in these countries, and as young as 12. Female genitalia mutilation is still going on, and the early child marriage. All of these are still issues, and major issues, and lack of education and voice among young people, young women especially, is a huge problem. Let me just show you this next slide that relates directly to this. This is an academy, which means they live there, and it's a private school that's run outside of Sikanani, Kenya, where obviously we spent a lot of time. There's about 50 young people there. There's about 8 young men, and the rest are young women, 42 young women. These are young people that chose to have an education, and their parents, because of tradition and needs at home, did not want them going to get an education. So now they're in this situation where they really can't go home because they would not be allowed to come back and finish their education. So now this school is raising, the headmaster, who I met with several times, Jacob, is raising funds to keep these young people in school. They chose to get an education, but they want them home. Obviously, even some of the young women are expected to be married by the age they are, and these are maybe 14 at the oldest there. And the young men are expected to be out taking care of the cows, as James did growing up. And they're saying, well, education's not doing us any good. For he should be learning how to take care, how to shepherd the cows or the sheep or the goats. So you have that situation going on, and the headmaster, Jacob, gave me this picture as a result of our discussion.
Picture. Now, I have to be mean here because of our time.
Sure.
We knew this was going to happen, didn't we?
Right.
We talked about this and said, uh-oh, we're in trouble because this topic is so incredible. James and I have had the conversation, we'll need to do a second program, or maybe a third.
Right.
But you do have, if we can briefly look at the systemic solutions you're looking at, and just maybe hit on some of those as we close it down today, because sadly we have to
approach it from a systemic.
Right, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and okay, so very quickly here, you can see obviously the gender issues have to be dealt with, and again, there are wonderful programs, there's NGOs, non-governmental organizations, as well as government, who are working on gender issues and women's equity issues and health, all of them. They're going on, but again, there's no system developed, and all this really is about building a system. So you got to get rid of that piecemeal effort, that disjointed effort that's going on. We need to build a government, and I don't mean build it in terms of more people. We need to build a capacity, government's capacity. If I were president in Kenya, I'd be downsizing the government. The government is, especially with the devolution that's going on, you have 47 counties now creating this huge governmental infrastructure, and the national government, as of yet at least, is not downsizing. So guess what's happening? You have more money going to government, it's not getting out to the citizens that need it, and you've got all these government officials, and there needs to be education and training going on. That's that preparation for devolution. And
youth involvement.
The youth involvement, we've got to build a system, and certainly, as you see there, expand secondary education, expand tertiary education, or technical education is what's referred to as tertiary education, as well as the university education have to be addressed. And the informal economy, which we didn't talk about, is huge.
Right.
And these are the young people, and these are the families who are creating their own enterprises. You know, they're doing business for themselves. They're selling the bracelets. They're selling the
crafts. We can on this wristband before we kind of check out here.
Yeah, this is what Larry is talking about, creating informal industries where the local, those youth and women can engage and participate.
And that would be an
and then make money and develop skills that can help them produce quality products that to meet the market demands.
Right. So the informal economy is huge, and there needs to be efforts to help develop that appropriately.
Yes. All those disengaged dropout students, if they had an entrepreneurial support.
Right, and this slide is the last one with narrative on it. Is really this integrated system, Karen, that you speak about. You know, in the developing world, you can't separate education, health, environment, and economic development, and the people don't. They look at it as an integrated effort. And if you're talking health, you also have to be talking education, you have to be talking economics, you have to be talking conservation. So we need to build that. There's a tremendous lip service given to that in the developing world, and most of your NGOs and your major international organizations, the World Bank, USAID, whomever, the UN, they really understand that, but we don't have the policies and programs in place to implement that. And that's part of what we're trying to do with our work there in Clemson. And avoided bringing it up, but we've got to address widespread corruption. Corruption is a major issue. I experienced it myself in several different forms. It's just a huge problem that has to be dealt with. And
But you feel like you're making a difference. I think I'm hearing that, or else you wouldn't keep going back. And I think the lesson here to our viewers is contact Larry Allen or James Nampushi if you want. There's so many opportunities to help a nation that has the strength of character of someone like James trying to do better and to go back and make their country better. And American universities can play a role in that in a variety of ways. You know, you see that, Karen? I mean, it's education, yes, but youth development, health, business, and you're gathering a lot from Clemson. And I know James is also on this mission. He loves Clemson. He's our ambassador. But he would not say no to other peoples across this country wanting to be engaged. So let's be sure we include their email addresses in case people want to be in touch.
And the blog and the journal article will give you some more information about life in Kenya. I think we were going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
there's more there.
That's the second show idea.
Second show, we will do that.
Yeah, so I hope you'll all agree. I thank you both for joining us today
for having us.
Special summer. I think we might want to do a special summer show every month. This is going to be a lot of fun to talk about fascinating things and a different way of life and how people are grappling with the old world and the new. It was just tremendous, the tip of the iceberg. Larry said something about spending 5 months there and learning a lot about the culture, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. So much to learn. And so we hope this is a tip of the iceberg for you. And so we appreciate your joining us this happy July day. So on to August, we'll have some other interesting summer programming for you before we start in full in the school year. But we've been happy to have you all join us today. And again, thank you, Karen, Larry, and James for today's solutions.
Thank you for having us.
This is Marty Duckenfield, and I'll see you next month.